The JavaScript version of Gatling is finally here, and for the millions of JavaScript developers out there who've been searching for a powerful and completely free to use load testing tool, your search is over, my friends. So in this video, we'll have a quick overview of what the Gatling load testing tool is and see how to get the JavaScript version of the tool installed and configured. Be sure to stick around for the entire video, as I'll then show you how to write a load test from scratch using JavaScript and Gatling. If that sounds like something you're interested in, then breathe in, breathe out, and let's explore this together. So for those that don't know, Gatling is a powerful open source load testing tool designed for DevOps and CI/CD environments. It's able to simulate huge levels of traffic against web applications and then generate detailed performance test results reports. Being an open source tool, Gatling enjoys widespread adoption and a robust community supporting one another. The reason that Gatling is loved by developers is that it has no interface or UI. Instead, you literally just write your performance tests as code. This has a number of significant benefits. Since your load test scripts are just code, the code can live alongside your application's existing production code, as well as other unit or integration tests. Of course, you can then check that code into your version control system, and perhaps most importantly, since your load test is written in JavaScript, it means you can write any additional custom code logic you want to use in your performance test. So for example, if you wanted to loop over certain sections of code, or trigger an API call, or reset something in the database, you can do all of that directly in the load testing script you write. Let's have a quick look at the history of Gatling. The tool was released back in 2012 and originally only supported writing tests in Scala. Now Scala is a powerful but relatively niche language that runs on top of the Java Virtual Machine, or JVM as it's better known. It's a relatively complex language to learn that doesn't really have widespread adoption, and because of this it was a barrier for many people to using Gatling for a long time. Things changed in 2021 when Gatling released a Java version. Java developers that wanted to use Gatling no longer needed to worry about first having to learn Scala. They could just go ahead and use the Java version instead. So of course, that's great if you're a Java user, but what about the millions of JavaScript users who have never used Java? Gatling wants to give those developers the opportunity to use their tool as well, and that's where the Gatling JavaScript version comes in. In case you're wondering how the JavaScript version of Gatling works, it basically uses a framework called GraalVM to translate JavaScript code into Java and then execute load tests on the JVM. If you want to learn more about the technical details of how the Gatling JavaScript version works, then it's explained in detail in this blog post, which I'll leave a link to in the description down below. And if you want an in-depth introduction to Gatling and all its different syntax and features, I'll leave a link to my Gatling crash course up here somewhere. But for this video, we're going to get our hands dirty and dive straight into a demo of the Gatling JavaScript version. If you want to follow along with me, there's a handful of prerequisites you should have installed. Firstly, you'll want to have Git installed on the command line just so that you can clone the example project. Most importantly, you'll need to have Node.js version 18 or later installed, along with NPM version 8 or later. And finally, it'll be helpful if you have an IDE like Visual Studio Code installed, but other IDEs will also work, of course. So before we get started writing our load testing script, let's take a look at the application we'll be testing. So the application that we'll be testing against in this video is this video game database. I've used this in a few of my videos previously, and I just used this simple application to help teach my automation courses. So the API that comes with this, it basically lets you do all of the different HTTP or API calls. So you can make get, post, put, delete calls. For this video, we're only just going to be focusing on making get calls. So I'm just going to try a couple of these out here. The first one I'll try here is this one to list all the video games. So I'll make this get call here by hitting execute. Then when we make this get call, we can see it calls this endpoint, and then we just get this array back with a bunch of data, a bunch of JSON that just represents a load of different video games. We could do the same thing if we wanted to just get a single game. So I'll click on this one down here. Just going to make sure that my media type is set to application JSON. I'll hit execute on that. And then in the JSON response, we just get a JSON back for just a single game, in this case, game number 3. Feel free to look around the other calls as well to do post, puts and delete. Just know that this application does run in a read-only mode. So anything that you do to the database, if you create an entry or delete an entry, that won't actually be persisted because it's running in read-only mode. Okay, so now that we've had a look at the application, it's time to get our Gatling JavaScript project set up. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the Gatling JS demo repo here, and this is the repo hosted by Gatling themselves. What we're going to do is we're just going to clone this to our machine. So I'm just going to clone here. I'm just going to copy the URL to my clipboard. So I've now opened up a terminal and I just need to do git clone and then paste in that URL. I'm going to cd into the repo that gets created. And I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio Code by typing code dot. So once we open the project in Visual Studio Code, we can start taking a look around the different files. So you'll notice that there's JavaScript and TypeScript. So this Gatling JavaScript does support TypeScript as well. For this video, to keep it simple, we're just going to focus on JavaScript, but know that you could use TypeScript as well. So if we open up the JavaScript folder, we can see we've got the normal package, package.lock JSON files, some other files here that we don't need to worry about. If we open up the source, computer database, Gatling JS, we can see that this is an example script that ships with the project. So again, if we were to execute this script, it would run a load test against the real application. In this case, this is Gatling's own computer database, their kind of demo application that they host online for teaching Gatling. So let's go ahead and try and run this now. So to do that, I'm going to open up a new terminal. I'm going to cd into that JavaScript folder. From here, I'm going to do npm install. That's going to pull in all of the dependencies that we need. I can then type npx gatling run -- simulation, and our simulation is called computer database. So what this will do is it will download the Gatling runtime and it will run the Gatling script for us. So the first time you run this, it might take a bit of time for all of the dependencies to download and install. Okay, so it looks like all of our dependencies have been downloaded, and now we're running this computer database load testing script. We can see the details of the test in the terminal here as the test is executing. And then after a few seconds, the test finishes and we get a message that this results report is available. So I'm just going to copy this here. If I switch over to my browser and open up that link, then we can look through the Gatling test results report. This just gives a breakdown of the load test that we just executed. We can see things like the number of users, any errors we encountered, the response time percentiles, etc. So if we head back over to our IDE, what we're going to do is we're actually going to create our own script completely from scratch. This one that we've got here is a little bit difficult to understand, particularly if you're new to Gatling. So I'm going to close that here. And still in the source folder, I'm going to right click, choose new file, and I'll name my file videogamedb.gatling.js. So at the top of the file, I'm just adding the imports that we need. So these come from the Gatling.io core and the Gatling.io HTTP packages. And then let's go down and set up our simulation. So we'll do export default, create our simulation. That simulation is going to contain a setup, which we're going to add in a moment. So as with all Gatling scripts, they're basically broken down into 3 different parts. So the first one that we'll add is the HTTP protocol. The second one is the scenario. So that's this load scenario that the virtual users take through our application. And finally, we add the simulation, and that's things like the number of users to run, how long to run the test for, etc. So for the HTTP protocol, we'll define a constant called HTTP protocol. That's going to use that HTTP that we just imported above. We'll set the base URL. I'll paste in the base URL of the application that we're testing. So again, if we jump over to Swagger quickly, we can see that when we make this API call, we can see our base URL here. And then that's the endpoint that we're calling. So we're calling the video game endpoint, but the base URL is this one here. After the base URL, I add the headers that I want to send with every API call. The first one is the accept header. We're going to make that application JSON. And I'll also add the content type header as well. And that one also will be application JSON. Remember to add the semicolon at the end. Let's next go down and add our scenario. So we'll say constant my scenario equals. So again, we can use the scenario, which we pulled in from above in our dependencies. Give our scenario name. I'll just call it my scenario. Now we can define what we want our scenario to do. So I'll add an exec block. I want it to make a HTTP call. I need to give this transaction a name. So I'll just call it get all games. And we want it to make a get call. We want to call our endpoint, which in this case is just /video game. After we make that call, let's add in a check as well. So I'm just going to check that the status we get back is a 200 for a good response. Add my semicolon, just going to tidy up the formatting, there we go. Okay, so our scenario is just going to make this one single call for now. Let's now go down to our simulation. So in our simulation, we'll add the setup block. We're going to call the mine scenario, the scenario that we just defined above. We're going to call inject open on that. And we're just going to keep it simple at first. So we'll just do @once users, just say one single user, and then we tie it to our protocol. So I'll say .protocols and use the HTTP protocol that we defined above. Add a semicolon here at the bottom as well, and I'm going to save this file. So now let's execute this script. So to do that, again, I'm going to open up another new terminal. I need to make sure that I CD into the JavaScript folder. So it's important, make sure you CD into the JavaScript folder or it won't work. Now I should be able to do npx gatling run -- simulation, and our simulation name this time is video game DB. Hit enter on that. And this time our load test should execute much quicker because the Gatling dependency has already been pulled into our project. So we can see straight away here that the load test has executed successfully. So we've created and executed a really simple load test here, but now let's add something more complex to our script. But before we go on, do me a favor if you're finding this video helpful, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel down below. Okay, let's write some more Gatling JavaScript code. So back here in our script, what we're going to do now is we're going to add in a second API call. So after we've made this getAllGames call, we're going to make a second call to just get a single game. So to do that, I'm first going to move this .exe block up here and put a new line in here like so. I'm going to move this check in slightly, and I'm going to put this bracket here on the new line. So after the check finishes, I'm going to add a comma, and then before we make the next call, I actually want us to pause here. So I'm just going to say pause for 5 seconds. Now in order to do the pause, we actually need to import that as well. So at the top here in the Gatling core package, make sure you add in pause, so that you pull in that package as well. So now we can make another HTTP call. Give this one a name. So this one will be called get single game. So similar to above, this is going to be another get call. It's going to get the game at the video game endpoint, but this time we're going to specify a specific game. So I'm just going to hard code the number 1 in at the moment. So again, if I just flick over to Swagger quickly, this is the call that we're making here. This second one here to get a specific game, and we're providing in an ID of 1 for this game. I'm going to add another check to that. So I'm going to say check again that the status we get back. Check that that status is a 200. Just tidy up this formatting. Okay, now we're making 2 calls. So let's save this. Let's go ahead and run this script again. So to do that, I'm going to reopen my terminal. And as before, I'm going to do npx gatling run simulation video game DB. So we'll let that test execute. If we look in the logs now, we're making 2 different calls. So one to get all the games and one to get a single game. So we're now making 2 API calls, but we've had to hard code in the game parameter in order to make that call. So what we could do is that we could take the game, one of the game IDs that comes from the first JSON response where we list out all of the games, grab that ID, save that into a variable, and then use that ID in the second call. So let's take a look at how we could do that now. So after the first call here, just after we check for this 200 response, I'm going to add in another check. And what we want to do with this check is extract the game ID from the first game that comes back. So one way that we can do that is with JamesPath. So again, we need to make sure that we add JamesPath to the imports up here. So we need to make sure that we're pulling in the JamesPath. And the JamesPath expression that we'll add is we'll just say take the first element that comes back and then grab the ID from that first element. So again, if I just come over to Swagger again quickly, it's basically saying, look at this API response that we're getting from getAllGames. Take the first element. This is the first element. This is the first object that comes back here. And then take that ID from there. In this case, it's going to be an ID of 1. Once we've put in our JamesPath expression, we can then say save as. And we're going to give our parameter a name of first game ID. So now that we've saved this first game ID into a parameter called first game ID, we can then use that parameter in the second API call. So instead of this 1 here, I'm going to take that 1 out. I'm going to add in a hash, which is for the Gatling expression syntax, and then add an open curly bracket, then we enter our parameter name, in this case, first game ID. We're again going to check that the status is at 200, and let's also check something that comes back in the JSON response as well. So we'll add in another James path here. For the James path this time, we're just going to add, just please extract the name for us. Again, jumping over to Swagger, if we look at the call just to get a single video game, that's this one here. I'll change that over to application JSON, make this call here. So it's basically saying this is the body that we're expecting to get back. So we're saying just extract this name, please. So we expect this name to be this, Resident Evil 4. So let's copy this string. Jump back over to the IDE, so then just say .is, and then paste in that string. Let's save that. So again, let's talk through our scenario. So we're making this call here to get all games. So you're calling this endpoint here, the video game endpoint, checking that we're getting a 200 back. We then grab the ID from the first object that comes back, and we save that into a parameter called first game ID. Then in the second call, we use that first game ID, and we make sure again that the response is a 200 okay, and we check that response to make sure that the name of the game that we get back is Resident Evil 4. Okay, so I've saved this script. Let's go ahead and execute it. Again, I'll open up a terminal. I can enter the same npx command. I can see I'm getting an error back. I've actually got a typo in my script, so I've got the wrong brackets here. So I need to take this bracket out and add a closing bracket here instead. So do be careful when you're typing out your Gatling scripts. It can be easy to get the brackets confused and mixed up. So I'll save that. Let's run this again, see if it works this time. And this time our test executes successfully, and it's making both of those API calls. So if we just wanted to check that our James path expression was working, let me, for example, change this to Resident Evil 5. I'll save that script. We're going to execute it again. And this time, if we look in the test results, we can see that we're getting this error back here saying expecting Resident Evil 5, but actually found Resident Evil 4. So that means that our check is working as expected. I'm going to put this back to 4 to save the script again. So another thing that we could do to our script is we could add a CSV file with test data in it and then use that test data within our script itself. So let's have a look at how we can do that now. So back here in the IDE, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a CSV file to hold our test data. So in the resources folder, I'm going to right click new file. I'll call my file videogames.csv. And then I'm going to paste in the CSV data for all of the games that live within our database. And by the way, if you don't want to type all of this out, I'll leave a link to the GitHub repository below that contains all of this data. So you can just download and copy and paste it from there if you prefer to do that instead. So I'll make sure I save this video game CSV file. I'll head back over to my Gatling script. I'm going to add in a comment here for just to remind myself that this is going to be the feeder for the test data. Let's define another constant. We'll call this one feeder. That's going to be a CSV feeder. And again, we need to import that in gatling.core above. We'll put in the path for our CSV file. Because it's in the class path, we can just say videogames.csv. And for the feeder strategy as well, we're just going to say random, which basically just means get a random entry from this CSV file. Let's now hook this up into our scenario below. So what we can do is we're going to make a third API call. So I'll add a comment after the second API call. Let's add in another pause just to slow the test down a bit. So I'll pause here for 2 seconds. And then say feed. And again, make sure that you're importing feed up the top here. So we import feed into Gatling core at the top. We called our feed feeder. So that's that feeder constant just above. And now we can write our HTTP transaction again. We need to give our transaction a name. So we'll call this one getGame. And in the transaction name, we can actually specify the name of the game that we're getting. So if I just open up this video game CSV file, so this is the parameter that's going to contain the game name. So all of the game names, which are the ones that come under the comment here. So I'm just going to comment this parameter name, or copy this parameter name, I should say. I can access that parameter with hash game name. So again, we're making a get call. The endpoint that we're getting is the video games endpoint. We then do hash and the game ID. So again, the game ID that we're getting here, that's this parameter here, whichever one gets loaded from the CSV file. let's do another check and check that the game is what we expect. So again, we'll do another James path. As before, that James path is just the name. Now, if you look before, we did .is and then hard-coded a string, but this time, because we're going to use a parameter, we need to do .isEl. EL stands for Gatling Expression Language. So just make sure that you do .isEl if you're using a Gatling parameter, basically. Otherwise, you're going to get an error in your script. So we'll just do open brackets. We'll do hash the game name and save that like so. So again, just before we execute this, let's look through the new code that we just added. So we've hooked up this feeder here. So basically, whenever this scenario gets called, whenever it gets to the feeder block, it's going to take a random entry from this CSV file, and then it's going to substitute these parameters with whichever entry we take from the CSV file. So I've saved this file. Let's go ahead and execute it now. So I'll reopen my terminal again, execute that same npx command. I can see I'm getting an error. That's because I had another typo in my script. This should be video game, not video games. Apologies for that. So change that to video game. Let's save and execute again. So this time, if we look in the logs after the test is executed, we can see we're making 3 calls. One to get all games, one to get single game, and one to get the game called SimCity 2000, which must have been the random entry that we chose from our CSV file. So far we've just been executing our load test with just a single user. So let's look at now at how we can add more users into our load simulation. So to do that, we'd edit our simulation down at the bottom here. So after inject open, I'm going to put that onto a new line to give myself some more space. So I'll delete what's there already just so that we can start fresh. So the first thing we'll do is at once users again. This time we'll do 5 users. So this means 5 users that will start as soon as the test starts. Then add a comma, then go to a new line. On a new line, I'm going to say ramp users. And again, we need to make sure that we import this ramp users package. So again, that's this imports ramp users up here in gatling.core. So let's say ramp to 10 users. We'll say do that during 10 seconds. Let's close this off by adding back in the protocols again. So we'll add protocols, HTTP protocol. And then we need the last closing bracket there as well, and the semicolon. And before we execute this, if you want to learn more about the other injection profiles that you can have, do check out the documentation here where it talks through all of the different methods that you can use to add virtual users to your script. So I'll leave a link to that in the description down below. So for this load test, we'd expect to have 5 users execute at once. We'd then expect to ramp up to an additional 10 users during a period of 10 seconds. So 15 users in total. So I've saved this script. I'm going to open up my terminal again. And then going to do the same npx gatling run command. So after a few seconds, we get a message back in the logs just to say that the load test is finished. Let's go ahead and open up the report. So I'm going to copy the link to the file. Jump over to a browser, open up that link, and then we can see the details of our test result report. So we can see all of the different requests that we made, the name of each game, how many times each call was made, and then other stats like the active users, response distribution, etc. So this was a high-level overview and demo of the JavaScript version of Gatling. Obviously, we only covered Gatling scripting at a very high level in this video. So if you want to learn more about the syntax and other functions of the tool, do check out the official documentation. But what about you? Are you planning to use the JavaScript version of Gatling for load testing? If there's anything specific you'd like to see covered in a future video, just let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. But thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.